Which water worry where? I'm Dan Howe. Water quality is not just one issue, it is many issues. And not every water body has the same issues. So understandably, people get them mixed up. This talk will help you sort it out. A little bit about my organization. Prairie Rivers of Iowa is a federal 501c3 not-for-profit headquartered in Ames, Iowa. That means that we accept donations gratefully, and it also means that we write grants. So if you have a project in mind that you'd like to partner with us, please get in touch. Our mission is to promote economic development through the restoration and conservation of Iowa's cultural and natural resources. We are one of several resource conservation and development organizations in Iowa, if you know what that means. If you don't worry about it. We've done a lot of different projects over the years. Our current main projects are promoting tourism and economic development, doing interpretation, historic preservation along the Lincoln Highway Heritage Byway. And our other program is watersheds and wildlife. My area of specialty is watersheds. My colleague David Stein is a pollinator and prairie expert, but there is a lot of overlap between the two because practices that benefit wildlife often benefit water quality and vice versa. The watersheds, a watershed is just the land area that drains to a given body of water. Our work has often been focused on Iowa Creek and the headwaters of the South Skunk River in Boone, Story, and Hamilton County. And we spent several years working on a project in Iowa Creek watershed, first doing education and outreach, so community events, field days, videos, educational materials, trying to encourage the use of cover crops, no-till, other conservation practices, and improve water quality in Iowa Creek. And also working directly with farmers and landowners to get some practices on the landscape, including cover crops, no-till, and edge of field practices like denitrifying bioreactor. We had a grant with the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship, and the focus of that project was nutrient reduction, which ultimately is going to reduce our impact on shrimpers in the Gulf of Mexico, that dead zone. Caused by nutrients. But that's far away. And so often it gets framed like this. So we get lost in the weeds about strategies and plans and grants and cost share and practices. And then when you're talking to people, they wonder, how does this affect me? So how does it affect me? If you know, the South Skunk River and Iowa Creek have high nitrate levels, and maybe your river does too. So let's have a little quiz. So if my river has high nitrate levels, what does that mean? Does it mean we're hurting shrimpers in the Gulf of Mexico? Does it mean it is safe to drink the water from the tap? Does it mean that I will get sick if I tip my canoe and swallow some water? Does it mean it is safe to eat the fish? Does it mean there are fish to catch? So if you got some of those wrong, do not worry. Many people get those wrong, including people who are pretty well informed about water quality. So let's try to sort this out. So first of all, is the water safe to drink? I think most people know that there are health concerns associated with nitrate in drinking water. Blue baby syndrome is the one that gets talked about most often, but nitrate is also linked to certain cancers, even at levels below the drinking water standard. People get confused about the issue of where. Just because there are higher nitrate levels in the river, as there are in the South Skunk River, does not mean that there are high nitrate levels in the drinking water in the city of Ames, for example. So in the city of Ames, we actually are finding nitrates are non-detectable. So there are things that happen in between the river and the tap. In the case of the South Skunk River, the water is moving down through the riverbed into a buried sand and gravel deposit. And along the way, there are microbial activity that's happening and chemical processes in the sediment and in the rocks that are removing a lot of that nitrogen from it. So by the time it gets to the wells and the drinking water plant, they don't have to do anything about it. In other cases, like the city of Des Moines, the treatment plant is mixing from different water sources or is using using a treatment system, often at great expense, to remove the nitrate. So I've heard of people who are drinking bottled water in Des Moines because they're worried about the water quality. You don't need to do that. They are required to keep it below that drinking water standard. Where I think people should be concerned about drinking water, as far as, should I drink water from the tap, is in private wells, because there the responsibility is on the homeowner to do the testing and to do any treatment, which is often prohibitively expensive. So there are as many as a quarter of wells in Iowa that have nitrate exceeding the standards, also many wells that have bacteria contamination, especially concentrated in northeast and southwest Iowa. The reason for that is those areas have limestone bedrock close to the surface. Limestone makes caves, sinkholes, has cracks in the rocks, which allow water from the land surface, contaminated water, to get into wells and streams. In other areas, we do have a few. Those are more often due to issues with the well casing, or with a neighbor's well that maybe was improperly sealed and provides a pathway for water to get down. Now, this is a separate issue from, if I sit in my canoe and swallow some water. So where people get mixed up about this is there are some things that make you sick with chronic exposure, right? If you drink a glass of water with high nitrate levels, every day for 10 years, you're going to have an elevated risk of cancer. Same thing for some pesticides at the very low levels that we sometimes see in water. But that is not the same as acute exposure, right? So if you just drink one mouthful of water accidentally when you tip your canoe, the things that are likely to make you sick are waterborne illnesses, things like Giardia and Salmonella and hepatitis E. So various things, and those are usually hard to detect. And so we measure E. coli, which is a more common fecal indicator bacteria, or to put it more bluntly, is there poop in the water? So there are many places in Iowa where there's not poop in the water, where the water meets the recreation standard for low E. coli levels. Some of our premier destination lakes, like Okoboji Lake, the Des Moines River, and other major rivers below reservoirs. Reservoirs seem to kill a lot of the bacteria through UV disinfection and other things. Above reservoirs, and in many of our rivers in Iowa, we do see high E. coli levels in many of our lakes as well, especially in northern Iowa, like Little Wall Lake. The DNR has information about a lot of these, but many waters in Iowa have never been assessed by the DNR. And we have found that this issue is much more widespread than was previously realized. We tested 10 streams in Story County last year, and we found that all but one exceeded the primary contact standard for E. coli. So take some precautions, pack hand sanitizer, minimize your exposure, try not to get water in your mouth when you are recreating. But when people hear about these kinds of issues and say, ew, gross, there's poop in the water, don't eat the fish. And, I've heard this from a lot of people, including, the county sanitarian and my dad. I'm like, wait a minute, is this true? And I realized it was not. So which water are we talking about? So with bacteria, that is killed during cooking, right? So if there's E. coli on the surface of the fish, just like if there was salmonella on the surface of your chicken, raw chicken, if you prepare it properly and cook it, that's going to get killed. You don't have to worry about it. Nitrogen is not something that accumulates in toxic forms in fish. Nitrogen readily changes forms in biology. And so in the form you'll find it in the fish is protein, which is good for you. The things that we worry about in fish tissue are things like mercury and PCBs, toxins that accumulate up the food chain and persist. So where is that an issue? The answer is kind of surprising. So take a couple of examples. The South Skunk River above Ames has high E. coli levels, has high nitrates, a lot of issues, but does not have concerns with mercury or PCBs in the fish. Whereas some places that you think about having pristine water, like Hungry Jack Lake in the Minnesota Boundary Waters, one of my family's favorite summer vacation spots, has a fish consumption advisory for mercury. And if you look at the numbers, mercury in fish tissue and in a smallmouth bass fillet in the Susquehanna River is quite low, lower than you'd find in canned tuna, whereas mercury in some of these northern Minnesota waters is 2 to 5 times higher. So that doesn't mean you can't eat the fish. It just means you need to limit how many you eat, especially higher up the food chain, the bass, walleye, pike. And so this is an interesting thing if you're to get a sense for airborne pollutants and how those interact with water. So mercury can be released through emissions from smokestacks, from coal burning power plants, and from industry. And so we have seen a lot of mercury settle over the years, and that persists in the environment in northern Wisconsin and Minnesota because they are downwind from the Rust Belt, from those major industrial centers, whereas the Iowa has less. So if you were wondering about mercury and PCBs, the Iowa DNR does test in waters that have a lot of get a lot of fishing, and so you can find this on their website or in the manual of fishing regulations, which lakes and rivers have fish consumption advisories. A related issue is, are there fish to catch, or more broadly, are there other critters in the streams, mussels and mayflies and things that, is there a healthy aquatic environment? So this gets complicated because there are so many different things that affect fish and aquatic life. So one of my favorite resources is the Midwest Regional Stream Quality Assessment. The U.S. Geologic Survey did a study of creeks all over the Midwest and measured everything that you could think of. And so you can see, well, let's find a stream near me. So here's one, a tributary of Indian Creek near Zering, and it scored poor for fish. One of the best predictors of whether there was a diverse and healthy fish community was total nitrogen, along with phosphorus and dissolved oxygen. So it gives you a little bit of a sense for what are the factors that are influencing aquatic life and what might we be able to do about it. The invertebrate community, the mayflies, stoneflies, things like that, scored fair. One of the best predictors of that was pesticides in the sediment, especially pyrethroids like bifenthrin. Riparian habitat is also very important. That's one that's a little bit easier for volunteers to see and measure, as well as the amount of fine sediment. Is it a rocky bottom or is it a silty bottom? So there's a lot that goes into this. Algae in lakes and stream is a concern that crosses multiple waterways, so obviously impacts fish and aquatic life. If you get your drinking water from that lake or a river, microcystins, toxins that are produced by some kinds of algae, are a concern. And this is, of course, a concern for recreation, both because you don't want to be swimming in an algae mat and because of the toxins that can be produced. But this is an area where it gets very confusing because, like here, we're seeing a lot of algae right now in Iowa Creek, but the nitrate levels are very low, and this is not a stream that we've seen regularly high phosphorus levels either. So this is kind of one challenge that we run into, especially in rivers. The science is complicated. You got to think about the type of algae. This is green algae. We're not concerned about that as much as blue-green algae, the cyanobacteria. Nitrogen is not the limiting nutrient. Usually in streams it's phosphorus, and the biggest influences are light and temperature. And so often the effect of water quality is muted by these other factors. So it gets complicated. One last thing is, let's not forget about water quantity, how much water is in the stream. So here is a little tributary of Iowa Creek that drains storm water from my neighborhood and others in northern Ames. Here is how it looks at the start of a rainstorm, and here is how it looked 15 minutes later. A rushing torrent of water after all the rain that hit those paved surfaces, those driveways and streets, rooftops in my neighborhoods and others in Ames came down. And as you can see from this sloughing bank, there is a connection between water quantity, how much water and how quickly it is moving to our streams, and water quality. So you can see this is really dirty, muddy water. So this is something we want to think about, and often there are practices like cover crops that can do double duty. They're improving the water holding capacity of soil, and they're holding nutrients in place, and so protecting water quality. So if you are concerned about which water worries impact your community, or how to understand and communicate those, please get in touch with us. We write grants. We'll do projects on contract. We are looking for partners right now and can help you with field days and workshops, landowner assistance. We have a native seed bank that is making prairie seeds available to people for free who want to get started. We do a lot of work with water monitoring, planning for where to test water, doing data analysis, helping with volunteer events. We've done various kinds of education with creek and watershed signs, as well as GIS mapping. So if any of these you think would help your organization or community figure out which water worry where or how to address it, please get in touch with us.